Determinants of elasticity of demand. Of the two curves, which do you think would best represent demand curve for oil? Oil has a very few substitutes in its major use, which is transportation. So when the price increases a lot, the quantity demanded falls by only a little. Thus, the demand curve for oil is not very elastic and would best be represented by the demand curve I. The fundamental determinant of the elasticity of demand is how easy it is to substitute one good for another. The fewer substitutes for a good, the less elastic the demand. The more substitutes for a good, the more elastic the demand. So, when the price of oil goes up, people complain, but few stop using cars, at least not right away. But what happens to the elasticity of demand for oil over time? The demand for oil tends to become more elastic over time because the more time people have to adjust to a price change, the better they can substitute one good for another. In other words, there are more substitutes for oil in the long run than in the short run. Since the OPEC oil price increases in the 1970s, the US economy has. Since the OPEC oil price increases in the 1970s, the US economy has slowly substituted away from oil by moving towards other sources of energy such as coal, nuclear, and hydroelectric. Although it took many years, but today the US economy uses about half the amount of oil per dollar of GDP than it did in the 1970s. So in the long run, there are even substitutes for oil in transportation. One reason why mopeds are more popular and SUVs less popular in Europe than in the United States is that taxes make the price of gasoline much higher in Europe than in the United States. Europeans have adjusted by buying more mopeds and smaller cars and driving fewer miles. Americans would do the same if the price of gasoline were expected to increase permanently. If the price of oil increases by a significant amount for a long period, then even the organization of cities will change as people move from suburbia towards apartments and townhouses located closer to work. It may seem odd to think of moving closer to work as a substitute for oil, but people adjust to price increases in many ways, and economists think of all these adjustments as involving substitutes. If the price of cigarettes goes up and people decide to satisfy their oral cravings by chewing carrots, then carrots are a substitute for cigarettes. In short, the more time people have to adjust to a change in price, the more elastic the demand curve will be. Now let's compare the demand for Orange Crush, which is a particular brand of orange soda, with the demand for orange soda. There are many good substitutes for Orange Crush, like Fanta Slice, Orangina, etc. As a result, the demand for Orange Crush is very elastic because even a small increase in the price of Orange Crush will result in a large decrease in the quantity demanded as people switch to substitutes. The demand curve for orange soda, however, is less elastic because there are fewer substitutes for orange soda than there are for Orange Crush, and the substitutes such as root beer or cola are not as good. So, the general point is that the demand for a specific brand of a product is more elastic than the demand for a product category. What counts as a good substitute depends on a buyer's preferences as well as on objective properties of the good. If the price of Coca Cola increases at the supermarket, many people will buy Pepsi, but others will keep on buying Coca Cola because for them Pepsi is not a good substitute. So, some people have a more elastic demand for Coca Cola while other people have a less elastic demand. A closely related idea is that demand is less elastic for goods that people consider to be necessities and is more elastic for goods that are considered as luxuries. Of course, for some people, their morning coffee at Starbucks is a necessity, and for others, it is a luxury. Thus, we can summarize by saying that the demand for necessities, however a person defines that term, tends to be less elastic, and the demand for luxuries tends to be more elastic. The higher a person's income, the less concerned they are likely to be with the price of an item. Thus, higher income makes demand less elastic. For example, in 2008, the price of wheat tripled, and many people all around the world bought less bread. But neither of the authors of this book cut back much on his consumption of bread. The price of bread is too small a portion of our budgets to worry very much about its price. So, our consumption of bread is not very elastic. On the other hand, when the price of housing increases, we buy smaller houses just like everyone else. Thus, the larger the share of a person's budget devoted to a good, the more elastic his or her demand for that good is likely to be. Let's summarize the determine factors determining elasticity of demand through this table. Less elastic, fewer substitutes, short run, less time, categories of product, necessities, small part of budget. More elastic, more substitutes, long run, more time, specific brands, luxuries, large part of the budget.